Phone books, yum, yum.
My name is Max. I work for the heart.
Nothing gets you into it like TV Guide.
Meet me in the new TV Guide.
The life and times of people who lived long before the internet was commercialized and quite structured. Simple tasks could take hours, and people had to go long distances or put in significant effort to get anything done. You wouldn't believe the things that people had to do in these pre-internet days, so let's take a look at life before the internet and hit that subscribe button as we begin. When bills were due at the end of the month, most people would pay their bills by mail. There was no online banking and electronic payment, and the only way to guarantee safe payment was by mailing it in. Each household received a paper bill in an envelope for utilities like gas, the home loan, credit cards, and more, and the detailed statement showed the charges and the due date. All you did was write a check, attach the payment stub and a postage stamp, and then post the bill at the post office or leave it in the mailbox for the carrier to pick up and deliver. It was usually necessary to mail payments in a week or two in advance of the due date to make sure that they arrived on time, as late fees often led to warnings and penalties. If your mail got lost or delayed for some reason, it was quite an inconvenience. The process of preparing the mail was a tedious routine, especially for homes with multiple bills. You had to dedicate a day to handling finances and balancing the checkbook to ensure that payments were documented. Making mixtapes were a major part of music culture as far back as the 70s. When the radio played music, you'd have a blank cassette waiting to record, and once it started playing the genre of music you liked, you'd push the button and continue to record each time a song came on, only hitting stop at the end. You'd record on both sides, which added up to a total of 90 minutes, and many people made their own mixtapes by recording music off the radio, labeling each and every one according to what they were. Sound quality could differ from one song to the next, but it made for good, cheap entertainment. Swapping mixtapes with friends was also a thing, and you'd swap them to acquire songs that you didn't have, while trading ones that had duplicates. Some people even bought mixtapes if they didn't have their own, and they could also be given out as a romantic gesture to friends and loved ones.
1, 2, 3, 4, Season Town Center is the one to see.
Back when technology was in its infancy, people had to appear in person for everything, from going to the office to shopping. There were no apps or online stores to order your items, and certainly no internet. Most businesses didn't even have a delivery service. You had to go shopping in person, and most people today will never understand the feeling from moving to aisle and shopping with a cart while analyzing the best products and choosing them based on your budget. Shopping was a great way to meet people and socialize. If there was some kind of sale, frequent shoppers were the first to hear about it. Not only was it fun and relaxing, but also a healthy option that gave friends the platform to bond over a great shopping experience.
Phone books, yum, yum.
Using phone books was a common practice before the internet became a thing. It was a large printed book that listed all the phone numbers of people and businesses in the area that you lived. The difficult part was going through hundreds of pages to track down a specific person or company. This task took a long time and was a huge inconvenience on emergencies. Most phone books were arranged alphabetically by last name for residential, and businesses were categorized by industry in a section called the Yellow Pages. So if you needed to call a restaurant or a business, you'd flip over to the appropriate category. If you were having problems finding certain information, some books had a reverse directory which allowed you to find someone using their phone number. It often felt like a school project each time, as the books were bulky and updated every year. The crazy part is people also had the option to get their number unlisted for the sake of privacy. That meant that you could search for hours and still not find your great aunt's residential number and address. Before the technology for email and texting was developed, one of the primary ways to communicate over a long distance was handwritten letters. Writing a letter by hand was something everyone had to learn to do, whether it was informal letters to reach out to a friend or a business letter that had to be handwritten, well folded and placed in an envelope, which included the address of the recipient. You also had to pay for postage, which often depended on the weight of the letter. It could take days or weeks for the letter to arrive, since all of them had to be sorted at the post office before being transported via the road to various locations. It was generally a long process, and if you were expecting a letter, you'd check your mailbox every day in excitement until it arrived. There was always a special charm and joy in receiving letters, especially from a loved one. Learning was a much tedious process than it is today, as visiting the library was the only way to find significant information for projects and classwork. People would usually just go to the local public library or a school library to borrow books and study. They were arranged in a certain order. You had to find the card catalog that contained drawers of index cards, and these cards were arranged in order of author, title, and subject. So when you found the flip card containing the information of the author, you'd find the book's location in the vast expanse of the library. You then moved from row to row until you found the book. Visiting the library was always like some form of adventure that ended poorly if the book had been borrowed. Not to mention, you also needed a library card to get them. If you wanted to take pictures, you had to wait for days or even weeks before you got a printed copy. This was a time before digital photography, and mobile phones certainly did not exist. People owned film cameras that contained rolls of film, and after taking the pictures, you had to develop the film at the lab. Developing film included processing the light-sensitive film in a dark room with special red or amber lights. Chemical baths helped to reveal the images with all of its colors and tones onto photographic paper. Developing pictures in a lab was a time-consuming process and would require drop-offs and pickups. Despite the slow time, it was always exciting to finally collect those printed copies and relive the moment again. Speaking of memories, you needed a good memory to thrive in the era before cell phones and the internet. This was because most people used a landline and had to either memorize phone numbers or write them down in a book, especially those they used often, like friends, relatives, and loved ones. Unlike modern phones that have speed dial and phone books, the old landlines didn't have any options for storing numbers, so you had to memorize those important ones. Imagine trying to make a call on a payphone. You had to rely on your memory.
Imagine the perfect video store. Right, over 10,000 videos.
When blockbusters would hit home media, movie lovers would hurry to the video rental store to rent movies. Video rental stores were common and usually had format options like VHS and DVD. You had to have a membership card to rent the movie, and after you presented it, you could access to rent any movie of all genres, and the store clerk could provide recommendations based on your preference. Rental stores often had their own policies and typically gave you dates to return the movie, with a late fee if you didn't return it on time. Families and couples often looked forward to a great evening of watching a rented movie for entertainment. Kids would gather in front of the television, especially if the movie was an action film. If the movie happened to have a glitch, you could return it and exchange it for another one before the return date. The news was usually broadcast at specific times of the day, both on TV and radio, so people would often plan their schedules around these broadcasts, ensuring they had a bit of free time to listen to the latest updates. Newspapers were another source of news, and if an event happened on a specific day, you'd have to either wait for the news in the evening or check it out in the early morning newspaper. The time required to print the information on paper and put it out, breaking news might have taken hours or even days to reach the general public, depending on where the event happened and the printing schedule of the press. Today, news is instant and spreads like wildfire all over social media and other news networks. When navigating an unfamiliar road, drivers had to use a map for guidance. Maps were large, foldable pieces of paper that showed various routes, including highways, streets, and lanes. The driver would fumble with the map while trying to make out where the next turn was. They were helpful back then because you could tell where the next gas station would be located if you ran out of gas, or where certain addresses were. They were easily foldable and usually stashed in the glove box. Some were for local city routes, while others were designed for long distance. Drivers had to learn how to read the map, and landmarks like rivers, well-known buildings, railways, motels, and more helped them to track direction. When you were done using it, you folded it to its original form, and that was another project that very few had the time or skill for.
Tom Snyder says he was born to work in television. Find out why in the new issue of TV Guide.
If you were ever wondering about the lineup of television programs for the week, all you had to do was read the TV guides. TV guides were helpful in those days, as they were the only way to know the programs for each day of the week. Some people bought them from the store, while others had a subscription that delivered them to their homes. It was easy to know what days and times your favorite show was going to air, and if you were one of those meticulous people, you would tick off programs with a pen to remind yourself of the time slots for your entertainment. TV guides also provided other valuable information, such as when a particular movie was set to premiere, reviews and interviews with TV stars, the latest gossip in show business, and behind-the-scene information on popular series. It basically covered all the information that improved the viewing experience of its customers. Today, program schedules are a click away, but TV guides remain a nostalgic treasure of the long-forgotten past. In schools, technologies like word processors had not been invented, so students had to handwrite their school reports with a pen. Handwriting was the most accessible way to take notes and turn in a project or assignment. It was a dedicated method that not only was time-consuming but also enabled teachers to distinguish each person's distinct handwriting style, making it easier to detect foul play. In some cases, students were allowed to use a typewriter. However, using one required professional skill, so most had to get an older sibling to do the typing. It was always a rewarding feeling when you completed an assignment that was free of error, either by handwriting or by typing. When kids were out of school, they had to come up with ways to keep themselves entertained, and that generally involved playing outside. Some kids would ride their bikes, race down the street with no helmet, and others would come up with pranks to play on their neighbors. Kids would play tag and chase each other around to determine who was it, or maybe indulge in a game of hide and seek. Board games were not off the table, but you had to own one. Skipping rope, pat a cake, and cops and robbers were all traditional favorites, and it was always a fun time outside with other kids, and easy to tell where everyone in the neighborhood was by the number of bicycles parked in a single place. Parents were happy to let their children go out and explore, and they only came home when the street light came on. In the early days, if you heard a new and unfamiliar word, the first thing you did was use a dictionary to confirm the meaning. There was no internet at the time, so everything had to be done manually. Dictionaries were large with thick hard covers made available in schools and many homes, and smaller versions were available to students to carry around. Words were arranged in alphabetical order, making it easy to skim through until you found the word you were looking for. Many scholars loved to spend time with their dictionaries learning new words, and some just couldn't wait to use the newly developed vocabulary on others who were usually impressed. In those days, using the dictionary was a sign of diligence to learning and highly encouraged by parents. Nearly every household used a landline of some sort, which were usually rotary phones. Whenever a call was made and the recipient on the call already, the caller would have to wait for a busy signal. Once you heard a beep sound, you knew the person you were calling was on another call. In these times, communication technology was still in its infancy, and voicemail was not yet invented. there was no way for a recipient to know that a call was trying to get through, and it wouldn't be until the 70s that call waiting technology became the norm. People were now able to see pending calls while they were on a call, which allowed them the opportunity to prioritize because waiting for the busy signal was time-consuming and a huge inconvenience. The call waiting technology brought about a significant change in telecommunication.
Thomas Cook are offering up to £260.
Making travel arrangements were a bit more complex than they are today. It was common practice to visit a physical travel agency in order to book a flight, accommodation, car rental, or more. The travel agent aided in securing flight tickets and visas and provided options for according to your budget. Oftentimes, travel agents would inform their local clients about special deals, group discounts, and other offers that they might find enticing. Payments were usually made through the agency, and after booking, the agent would provide tickets, printed brochures, and detailed itinerary that would help to improve the traveler's experience. Today, there are online booking systems and websites that have made DIY travel arrangements quite seamless.
Actually, I whipped it up in just over 30 minutes. I admit I did have help from new continental cookbook casseroles.
Cookbooks were quite popular long before the internet arrived. They were one of the essentials when trying out a new dish. You would look up a recipe in cookbooks, gather the ingredients, try to follow the steps, and hope for the best. Sometimes you had to improvise when certain ingredients were unavailable. They were the unsung heroes of the kitchen, the lead chef who ensured the cook diversified their cooking skills by following a set of well-laid-out instructions. Sometimes we bought them from famous TV chefs, the more famous the better, and these cookbooks were extremely helpful to both professionals and those who were relatively new. Do you remember asking for directions whenever you were unsure of where you were going? People used to do that long before digital maps, GPS, and the internet. There was no other means to locate a place, especially if you'd never been there before. Even though there were printed maps with landmarks, there were often small discrepancies that may be prone to short-term change, such as construction, revegetation, temporary structures, and other activities that made the map inaccurate. Asking for directions in a polite manner was a common way to navigate new territories. Of course, there are creepy depictions in Hollywood films about things that can go wrong when you ask a stranger for directions, but nonetheless, asking for directions was a necessary part of getting around when you were unsure of the route. Waiting in line for the ticket was one of the most exhausting experiences of the old days. Whether it was a concert ticket to see the hottest band in town or tickets to a new movie that had just premiered, standing in line and waiting for hours was draining, but also added to the hype and importance of the show. You knew a particular show was going to be exceptional by the length of the queue. Major releases like Star Wars and Jaws had people waiting in line for hours. True fans would camp out for days to secure their place in line, and to make things even worse, standing in line for a period of time didn't even guarantee a ticket. Often, the center would run out of tickets, and these were common risks that people were willing to take. You could easily book reservations online today, and you don't have to go through the hassle. If we were to go back to the old days before the internet, which of these activities would be unbearable for you? Let me know in the comments down below. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications so you never miss another great memory in the future. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.